little funny today. I'm fighting a bit of laryngitis, so I apologize. I haven't talked at all this morning till this moment, and I probably won't talk after. So, thanks for your patience. So we're going to continue on in terms of speaking about etiquette, which is kind of an interesting topic. And I'll be curious at the end. I'm just going to ask if there's anything from a holiday perspective you consider to be etiquette, because that's the season we're going into. So, excuse me, I might have to stop to take a quick drink every once in a while. Hopefully none of you are suffering with the flu like me, but hopefully you'll get through the season unscathed. In terms of etiquette, so we talked last time about what it is, why it's important, and sort of the majority of time we spent last time and today will be around the how. So when we think about one little recap around ethics and etiquette, so etiquette being sort of a general cultural phenomenon, something that we would all notice would be accurate or someone breached the etiquette or did something inappropriate. We'd all kind of be aligned in what that looks like. And again, some of the things today, I'll be curious to see if you guys can tell me if there's anything that I bring up today that you think is actually more ethics, it's more personally based, it's more something that maybe not aligned to how we are within Atlantic Canada. So again, there's debate in all of these, so curious to see what you think. So last time we got into speaking about the office, we finished on cubicle/office etiquette, so we'll sort of finish up on that. We'll talk a little bit more about making that positive impression, so what are those other things that you can do within the office or within business. In meetings, email, smartphone, and few little tips I'll offer at the end. And some of these things, it's incredible how we struggle sometimes because we don't know we're doing something inappropriate. But most of these things today, I'd say you're going to have a sense that you do, but sometimes we'll justify them, right? Like, oh, but I needed this or I needed that, and that's why I had to do it. So again, what does that look like? What does it mean, right? Does it make sense? Because if you do something once and you breach that etiquette, then is it something you're going to be doing frequently? Then it becomes something that may bother other people and might cause some frustrations. So in terms of the 12 commandments we talked about last time, and I'm just going to pop those, we went through the first 6, and now we're going to start tackling the rest. So these apply as well in an office setting, whether it's a cubicle or not. So thou shalt realize that everything you say makes an impression on your internal customers. So everything we do, as I've said to you many times before, you cannot not communicate. So every time you do something, you're making an impression. People are judging you. And it makes it such that they trust you, they don't trust you. Are you approachable? Are they worried about working with you? Are you the person they're going to come to for help? So just keep that in mind. In terms of personal phone calls, now I know within Atlantic Canada, we absolutely are family oriented, but there's always a line. So if we have something major going on and we haven't told anybody, which is fair, we may get more personal phone calls. How can that affect others, right? What does that look like? And even if we're in our office, sometimes you can hear the calls externally. And usually it's like, hey, honey, what are we having for dinner? Or who's picked up kids or whatever it is. And those are fine. But it's often about the frequency of those calls and are they interrupting other things that are going on in the day. This is an interesting one. So eye contact. So thou shalt not establish eye contact with someone when you prefer not to be interrupted. So that's a tough one. I'm curious. So somebody goes, let's say somebody comes to your, I don't know if you can have windows that you can see through into your offices, because I know most people on the call have offices, but if someone looks at you and you look at them, what does it mean, right? Sometimes when I'm actually on a coaching call, I purposely, if someone can see me, I purposely don't look at them because I'm in my conversation. I'm in that moment with that person. I can't cut that because it disrupts me. So I'm curious, do you think that's a good thing to have eye contact, or what would that look like to you? And someone can go on mute if you can. I can hear some background noise there. If someone can everyone make sure they're on mute, that will be excellent. So what do you think? Can I look in and do a little hand signal or do something? Is that appropriate? If my door is closed, I'm on the phone. No. Yes. Now, yes was, I think, from before. So the no, yeah, it's incredible how we sort of think some things are appropriate. So if I look at somebody, it obviously is an invitation. Then what often happens, I find anyway, you can tell me, is that somebody will start mimicking something or showing something, or like, I need you out here, and then all of a sudden your train of thought is gone. So, and it invites them sort of into your conversation, whether you like it or not. So it's worth thinking about. Again, come up with your own ground rules for your own organization. But if that generally would be something that would be not looked at positively. Now, next one. Thou shalt stand up and walk toward the entrance of your cubicle when you would like an impromptu meeting shortened. Now, this is an interesting one. How many times have you had people come in your office and just start talking to you, and you're right in the middle of something? So again, in an ideal world, yeah, if someone's on the side, say they're at the entrance, you can go up and talk to them. Right? So this is one I've never used. I read this one and I thought, this is interesting. Would you actually be able to go up and talk to them at the door and then work your way back to your office sort of desk area as well? So it's worth considering to see if that makes sense. So it again is a nice way of cutting people off in a positive way. Sorry. All right. Thou shalt recognize your cubicle as a direct reflection of your office should be neat and tidy. Now, I'm not sending you a picture right now of mine because it's not fabulous. It's been a busy time of year, which I'm sure many of you can relate, but it does say something about us, right? As I said to you before, in terms of reading people, it certainly says maybe what style they may be, but there's a neat and orderly element to it. So if you're having a meeting in your office, if you're doing something, you really have to make that first impression or that good impression. You're making an extra effort, at least to clean up some of the mess that might be in your office. This is a tough one. Thou shalt not listen to another conversation, not after recognizing it's not appropriate to do so. Because it's really hard to shut that off. So oftentimes, people, if I hear something, oh, I shouldn't be hearing that, I'll close my door, I'll close their door, whatever it might be, just so that I can stay out of that conversation. It's really human nature to listen, and even if you don't think you're listening, some of it will be absorbed. So again, in the world of privacy and confidentiality, and also harassment in workplace and things, if there's whispering going on and you don't think it's appropriate for you to listen to it, then you really should stop doing so. Now, in terms of cell phones in the office, where is it appropriate to use your cell phone? There is a phenomenon with cell phones, let me know if you think this is true, that we actually speak quite loudly on cell phones. Does anybody find that? People speak quite loudly on cell phones, like if you're in a public place. Yes, it's a strange phenomenon, and people do. And oftentimes, I'll be sitting in an airport and I'll be like, wow, that person's really loud and that's really inappropriate. It could be something, well, personal is one thing, but it could be confidential. It could be something about a client. And even though you think you're not saying anything, you often can be. This is a fun one. I love this one. How many times have you had smells go through your office? Right? So smells go through your office, someone's cooking something in the lunchroom, and it can be quite offensive in the sense that it's distracting. Sometimes it smells fabulous. Of course, the common one that people say is, oh, the popcorn, right? Yes, the popcorn. Look at Penny. She's right on the same train of thought this morning. It's so good, but it's so incredibly distracting. So again, if you're in the lunchroom and you're putting something in the microwave, try to keep the door closed if there's a door. Try to keep it, and if you're eating in your office, keep the door closed. And I love curries and things, so I'm sure I have offended some people over the years in terms of having some of that type of food. Now this is, I like this one. When you think about open door policy, isn't something that we sort of speak about it, but is it really real anymore? So in other words, if I have an open door policy, in other words, just come on in, does that make sense anymore? We as leaders sort of often will say, oh, I've got an open door policy, but does it really make sense anymore? Is it actually etiquette to do so or not? What do you think? Yeah, no, Penny, thanks, Penny, for that. Interruptions can be distracting. So here's something, I've had this discussion many times with leaders, and I think there's a bit of a shift. This was something probably 20 years ago that became quite popular saying. But But again, yeah, maybe I'm distracted. Maybe I need to do some work and get my work done, because if my door is open, I'm getting distracted. Guess what? I'm probably not going to be the most pleasant when people keep coming into my office either. So again, how do you actually, have your door open, like physically, if you have an office door, is it physically open when you're available, when you're not doing anything too intense? And when you're closed, it's a sense of respect. Years ago, I guess it was the pendulum has swung, but it was more around doors were closed all the time. And how do we create the environment of conversation and inclusion? And now I think it's gone to the other way, where it can actually be very distracting. So how do you set times in your day? Now, having your door closed all day and no one knowing why, that's not acceptable. Again, if you have something major to do, absolutely, but maybe tell someone nearby, tell a member of the team, I'm going to hunker down over here, the door's going to be closed. But if you really need me, come on in or give me a knock. So it's something I've seen shift as well. I had a really great conversation with a bunch of leaders a few weeks ago. It's like, how about leaving your door partially closed, right? So like, I am available, but come in if you really need to. So that was a nice one, like keep it, a few inches open. So there is some, kind of like, I am kind of open to conversation. So that was a really good suggestion. I've done it before, just never actually thought about it. And etiquette-wise, is your door partially open? Does it make sense? I think it does. You can let me know if you think any different. In terms of, I'm not the tidiest. I've said this to you before. I can be a little bit disorganized mess. I kind of know where everything is, somewhat. So, for example, when I go, I have 2 briefcases, and if I go, carry bags or whatever, if I go to meetings, so I always have one that's empty. So I can take, because if I take my one that's junk, full of stuff that I've got files on the go, then it can look extremely messy. So oftentimes, if I'm smart enough, I will take that empty bag and fill it with just what I need for that meeting. So things like that can be very helpful. And in terms of how other people see us and the etiquette around it. It's organized, it's precise, it's focused, it has a good positive impression. As I said before, I'm not good with names. Learning them quickly. You can actually use the person's name in the conversation. I learned this many years ago. Use their name like multiple times in the conversation. Oh gosh, it's really great to meet you, Doug. It not only does it make them feel connected and they're listening to my name and it makes sense, but it actually helps you actually understand it. Business cards, interestingly, do you guys still find business cards? I've talked to people in Toronto, and they find there's like virtual cards they're using more often. I find the physical card is still handy. You can let me know what you think. And having their business card, keeping their business card, remembering them that way, it can be really effective in terms of getting to their name. Writing something on the back is really helpful to kind of say, this is a little bit of something about them that can be really helpful in getting to know them. So again, their name is really significant. Now, when you're actually with people, I can often turn away. So looking them straight in the eye, that real contact, not glaring at them, looking at them in the eye, smiling at people as appropriate really works. Dress code, your office dress code, that's an interesting one too. That's shifted in terms of etiquette. Oftentimes I'll get complaints from organizations to say they have to have conversations with people around dress code. So, even when I speak with young people, if I'm in the university or wherever, I often say, when in doubt, dress up. If you're not sure if something's appropriate, err on the side of caution and be a little more on the formal side. So in terms of value judgments. Okay, here's a good one. We've got a team here so KBRS is a large recruiter as well, recruiting company as well. And we will often have clients or, could be anyone from, a junior leader up to some, a lot of executives and things that come through our offices within Atlantic Canada. And, how they approach and talk to the person at the front desk can be just as important about how they talk to the recruiter. I don't know if you guys find that, but it's worth thinking about, because it makes an impression if you say something that's a little curt or a little bit off-putting or a little bit judgy to somebody at the front desk, as an example. Don't make the assumption that it's not going to go anywhere, right? That person should be a valuable member of the team, and they could share their opinions. So in terms of etiquette, everyone should be treated equally. Every single person, from the person that you see, this is from years ago, if anyone's old enough, of pushing a mail cart to answering the phone in front of you to whoever it is. When you treat people that way, from an etiquette perspective, now this could be lining on ethics. You can let me know if you think so. But again, don't make value judgments on them. Don't make the assumption that someone is less than what they are. They're all equal members of a team. When I worked in banking years ago, we had the biggest, I might have mentioned this before, but the wealthiest client that we had in the branch that I was managing in was the person who would come in his jeans and his sneakers. So again, no different with clients, do the same thing within the workplace as well. And I touched on that one as well. Personal space is interesting. I think generally in Atlantic Canada, you can let me know. Oh, yes, thanks, Jen. Jen sent a note about the pet peeve of hers, everyone plays an essential role. It's true, right? We're all equals. And at some point, all of us have been that frontline person or have been that person. And it's just as important. And how do we treat them that way? Thanks for that. A personal space, I find we're pretty good in Atlantic Canada. I find there's not a lot of breaching of personal space, but you can let me know. On occasion, it can happen when someone steps in too close or they're too far away and you step in and they kind of step back. I don't know if you've ever had that happen before, but I think generally we have a good sense of that. I don't find it's really an issue. When I travel, though, around the world, I find that personal space does vary. So really respecting the people around you, watching what people do around you is really significant. And if someone steps back, if you step forward, that's okay. It's no harm, no foul. It's just say, oh, okay, they need a little more space. Don't judge them accordingly. So sharing of personal information. I've talked about this before as well. Do we share too much, too little, too quickly? Right? So is it something where we're not connecting with people right away? Or, in Atlantic Canada, we talk about everything, like we've said before, about the weather. We've talked a little bit about other things, but do we talk about personal things? Right? Just to meet someone and maybe mention around, oh, you just came from the hospital because, your mother's gravely ill, could be perfectly fine and it might not be, right? The caution I would have there is it may be quite comfortable for one, not another, so just respect that. Again, don't judge others for it. But sometimes if we're very open, if we're really stressed out, we might share more than we should. In terms of meetings, some of these drive me mad. In terms of meeting in offices, so if you're meeting in someone's actual office, physical space, try not to come too early. So this is something you might not have thought of before, but if you walk in 10 minutes early just to prep for the meeting, maybe the person's not ready yet. So, they could be busy, they could be tied up trying to clue something up before the meeting. So just make sure you don't arrive more than 5 minutes early. It's just a little tip. Never arrive late. Now, if you're going to, this is something I find drives teams mad. They get very frustrated. So-and-so is going to be late. What if the leader's late? Are people sitting around waiting for you? So if you're going to arrive late, though, you really need to let someone know and whether they can start without you or not, because otherwise people are wasting their time. I don't know if that drives anyone else crazy, but I find it drives a lot of teams crazy. And that's where you want to set ground rules if it hasn't been set. But that is something from a respect, from a cultural not to be late perspective. Again, all cultures around the world are different. They don't treat time the same way. But generally, if we say 10 o'clock, we mean 10 o'clock within Atlantic Canada, or within Canada for sure. And if you need to leave a meeting, so this is kind of awkward. So any suggestions would be great. But this is something that does get judged and may not be looked at from an etiquette, from a proper perspective. So if you need to leave a meeting, say I'm chairing the meeting and I'm in the middle of saying something, or another colleague is in the middle of saying something, do you actually say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I have to leave because I have to go do the following? Right? In an ideal world, yes. In an ideal world, you let them know in advance. You actually let them know if something comes up, oh my gosh, client emergency, I gotta go, right? But do you cut someone off? Sometimes if we leave though, so tell me what you guys think, if you leave the office and you haven't told them, it's like, oh, well, he just got up and left. Is that okay? So what do you think is appropriate? Is it okay to leave and not say why? Or should you actually interrupt somebody? So where is the etiquette? What do you think is the appropriate one? Yes, okay. So if emergency is interruptions, okay. And again, whether you explain it or not, you can absolutely wait to say sorry, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I have to leave. And signal is good, like, oh my gosh, like just a second, I got to stop. That's great. Really good suggestions. When in doubt too, if you think about it, if you have to leave, you can certainly go and apologize after and say, I'm so sorry, something came up, but you guys were in this interesting conversation. I didn't want to interrupt. But again, you got to think about that, right? If you don't do the follow-up, people will wonder why. And they will make up stories in their head if you don't tell them. Interrupting people is another one. So whether you interrupt like that, just got to go, pop out, which is generally what I do as well. Again, you have to read your situation. In terms of confrontation, where do you argue, right? In terms of business etiquette, if it's something quite confrontational, if you're going to disagree with somebody in a way that may put everyone off, right? Where do you do it? But there's a fine line here because everyone should be able to have open dialogue, right? So where do you disagree? So do you think it's comfortable? Do you think you should be able to say it in the meeting or not? You can let me know in the chat. The other thing is, to what extent? If I know someone's working for something for 3 months and this is the final presentation before it goes live, say in a new program, a new offering, whatever it might be, is it the right time to say, whoa, I disagree with this now? Or if it's something completely different, can you just disagree on a portion of it and move on? Or do you disagree after the fact? Do you go up to them personally and say, look, I'm not sure if I agree with this piece, or I don't know if I agree with that piece? It really is the level of confrontation that I find. Sometimes I find it completely inappropriate. If you're challenging your boss, you have to really think about that as well. Does it make sense to do in the meeting, or should it be done before or after the meeting? All right. And again, we've talked about this before in a different context, but give people time and space outside of meetings. So do they need to think? Do they need to, do you give them meeting minutes in advance, minutes or notes in advance? Absolutely, business etiquette wise. Do you actually give them time to think it through? Do you let them know if decisions need to be made? Absolutely. Those are absolutely the right things to do. So do you give them time and space to make decisions, to do reading outside of meetings before or after as well, right? So recognizing that everyone's uniquely different. Anything else you can think of in meetings? There's bound to be something that I haven't connected with there. What else drives you crazy in terms of you find really puts people off generally in Atlantic Canada in meetings? Anything else you can think of? Oh, thanks, Penny. Appearing completely disinterested in the topic. Love it. If you don't need to be there, don't be there. That's just my 2 cents worth. Excuse me. Don't be there. If you're not interested in the topic, if it's not applicable to you, you can excuse yourself. You can go in your merry way. You can send somebody else if you need to. That's brilliant. I love that. Cell phones. Oh, wow. You've probably heard me say before my opinions around cell phones in meetings. Now, if I'm facilitating a session and I know it's a 24/7 operation and these people are actually working managers, things can happen, or it could be something, it's a safety orientation too. Something happens, they need to go. So that's fine. But cell phones in general, I usually stop talking when people are on them and wait for them to finish. So again, but how do you come up with the ground rules for what makes sense in your organization? If you really need to be on it, is there something really dire, then you can let people know in advance, right? Let people know in advance. Say to them, look, I'm expecting a really important call. I will put it on silent, but I'm going to have to look at it every once in a while. I'm going to have it on vibrate on my lap so it doesn't distract people. Let them know it will not be seen as a breach of etiquette if you do that. Chatting to others while people are presenting. Some people can't help themselves. Doesn't make it right, but it's highly distracting. And again, if you find that people are talking around you, you can just stop talking. And again, no harm, no foul. Like, I know you're excited, or it's a topic that came up that's really interesting, and maybe it's related to what we're talking about, and then other times people will have to really put the law down and say, we have to have one person speaking at a time. Oh, yes. Thanks, Jen. Calling it one person rather than addressing specific issues privately or speaking generally about an issue. Sort of that passive aggressive, not really addressing it, not putting it on the table. Absolutely. It can be dry. Everyone knows what someone's talking about, and it's done in let's see if I got that right. It's done in a different way. Passive aggressive. Absolutely. It's very frustrating. And we in Atlantic Canada and Canadians are really terrible at it generally. We do have a lot. And sometimes, you can actually say, can you be more specific here? I think we're just skirting an issue. What is the actual issue? And just wait, right? Wait in the silence until someone answers it. Or if it's inappropriate, you can certainly bring it up to the person after the fact. Like, I think you were talking about so-and-so, and that wasn't necessarily appropriate. If you have an issue, bring it up in a certain way. This is where it gets into the gray areas of etiquette. Some of it's going to be, I agree with you, it's absolutely not appropriate, especially if it's related to some person or something sort of a little bit awkward or a little sensitive or a little private. So how do you deal with that? It's certainly an issue that comes up. It's just how do you, and what's your role in that meeting? Are you the leader? Should you absolutely deal with that? Yes. It should be dealt with quite quickly and talk about what it should be. And it does get personal sometimes. Thanks, Susan. It does get personal sometimes. And it's really awkward and it's really inappropriate. And you have to be careful too with those sorts of things as well. I mean, I don't think you're talking about this, but you have to be careful because sometimes when people get too far down that path, it actually could lead to bullying and harassment. Inadvertently, of course, but it could, people talking about people behind their back, but if they don't say their names, things like that. So you have to be very, very careful. All right, email etiquette. Oh, email, the bane of my existence. We rule our lives by email. Everything we do connects to email. Well, email is just texting, and we'll talk about texting in a minute. So, who do you email? How often do you email? What do the emails look like? Again, feel free to chime in here. I've got multiple things here on emails and texting. So in terms of one of the biggest things I hear is please don't CC everyone on an email. Please don't reply to all unless you absolutely have to. It's probably one of the most common things when I see teams putting ground rules together around does everyone need to be CC'd? Because your inbox becomes extremely full and you can't even find where the last email was. Is this the last in a chain of emails? So it can be very, very distracting for people. Responding to messages quickly. One thing that I see done really well, I think everyone agrees you absolutely have to respond promptly, or get someone else to do so if you're lucky enough. Oh my gosh, can you just call my client, just tell them I'm tied up and I'll get back to them now in the next hour. If you're lucky enough to have someone who can do that for you on occasion. And setting up out of office, I have to say, and I know setting up your voicemail and things, your email, all those things to say you're out of the office, you're unavailable from these hours. I think it's highly organized. I think it's highly acceptable. I think it's one of the things that I wish I could do more of. I don't think about it until it's kind of too late sometimes. So I think that's wonderful from an etiquette perspective. I think that says a lot about, you folks that do that. It says a lot about you and how much you respect your clients. No spelling mistakes, please. There's nothing that can drive people nuts than spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. And of course, here's the thing with spelling mistakes. It's amazing. I've seen, people applying for jobs or, even in the resumes having all these typos and things. And of course, you got to laugh because I don't know about in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and in PEI, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, they don't teach grammar in school. It's kind of crazy. So everything is all connected to the computer. But here's the thing. If we have computers now, why don't we use them, right? Just spell checking, reading something over before you send it. Always, always. Including your telephone number in your message. Please do that. Drives me crazy when people don't. And here's the kicker, too. We all have some emails, personal emails. But you have to remember, it's meant for business use, but also from a practical standpoint, it's the ownership of the organization. They own everything that goes through our emails. So yes, I absolutely use it to ask my husband what we're having for dinner. Oh my gosh, don't forget to pick up, Anna or Sophie on time or whatever it might be. But generally, it is their property, so you have to be careful in how that's being used. These are some ones that kind of drive me nuts. I'm just going to pop them up for time quickly. So clear subject line. Tell people what it is. Funny, I had to send a note this morning, and I made sure I did that, specifically around my health today, and I had to change a meeting. So I didn't want to say just the meeting today. I said We'll have to cancel the meeting today for another session I have this afternoon. Reply all unless you need to. Email signatures. Don't short names unless you're sure. So if you see someone's name is Christopher in their email signature, when you first email them, email Christopher, and they can certainly email back, thanks, Chris. Then the next time you can say Chris. Don't make the assumption it's a shortened name, but sometimes it isn't. And it can drive people nuts when their names are shortened when it isn't appropriate. Yes, I agree. Yes, Susan's got a good point there. I missed that. Apologies, Susan. Around it's hard to respond when you're on the phone constantly with clients. Completely get that. The etiquette is, and I've actually checked with people on this when I do ground rules with groups. Oftentimes they'll say, there's an expectation to respond with someone within 24 hours, right? Within that day. Now, not if they're emailing you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's usually a 24-hour turnaround. If people really need you, generally people will call or they'll email someone else. So yes, you're right. And then it's a matter of how, like sometimes people will make sure all their emails are responded to from the previous day the next morning as an example. I don't think anybody in the world is going to expect you to respond within 10 minutes. And if so, maybe you have to reset those expectations or maybe forward it on to someone else as well. And you can have that in your email signature if you're busy or if you don't get back, if this is an emergency, please contact so-and-so. Humor can be dicey in email. It never lands quite the same way as you think. Add email address last. So if you're sending something, I'm sure all of you, who here, has sent an email but inappropriately by mistake. So, oh, that wasn't finished, or, oh, I forgot to add this, or, oh, that was just me venting. So there's lots of things that can happen. You can send something by mistake. So put the email address in last, which is a great little tip on that. And make sure it's the right email address, because I've received one really confidential email somebody sent by mistake. Luckily, it was a client of mine, so it was fine. I just let them know I didn't even look at it. I just let them know it was deleted, but just be very careful. But sending that is probably one of the biggest no-nos in terms of etiquette, getting sent to the wrong person. And the last one too, just for time, is the detail. How much detail do you need to have in an email? Or is it really a phone call better? Right? So what makes sense? Maybe the email is actually better. It's a follow-up maybe to a call. And icebreakers are interesting. So oftentimes I can tell someone's style just by their email. If they get right down to business, I can kind of tell they're a certain style of person. Maybe they make a comment about the weather, those little icebreaker things. So it's really worth thinking about. Even if you've got something serious to do for a client, maybe you write up your email and then you go, oh, let me go back and put in a little bit of an icebreaker at the beginning. It could be, oh, hope you're having a great day, or hope you're enjoying the holiday, or whatever it might be. Work texting. How are we for time here? Okay. In terms of work texting, so texting is done. I remember it wasn't too long ago. It was probably 5 years ago I started texting with clients. Texting it's almost a whole other language altogether. So you can let me know what you think of that. But I find clients are more and more using texting. The one thing I will say though is if it's anything more than a few lines, it really should be in an email. Texting, often people use their phones personal and professional. It can get lost. It's not always as easy to do. So let me know if your clients you find are using texting. Never post anything. Think of it more like it's often like when you're meeting somebody, if you're going to be late or something, nothing confidential should be in through texting. It should go, because obviously it's on your phone. If it's going through your email server, it can be a little bit more confidential. So don't text it unless you're something you want to post, right? So something innocent, no problem, but don't put anything serious in there, because I find, especially with younger folks, I'm finding more and more confidential things in text, which are much more easily accessible from a privacy perspective. So they're just as important for spell check. And don't be using too many abbreviations even if it's standard in regular texting. When in doubt, be more formal than you would normally with a text, especially with clients or even with colleagues for that matter, depending on how well you know them. And emojis. Okay, is it appropriate? Oh yes, teenagers abbreviate everything, honestly. Can you use an emoji with a client? What are your thoughts? It's funny. People don't. Yeah, I agree. Don't use emojis. But I've had clients emoji me. Yes, you can do a simple smile. Absolutely. So that's true. I actually have done a simple smile when a client was apologizing to cancel a last minute meeting. I said, "Oh my gosh, no problem," smiley face, right? It was, and this is a young client too. It certainly wasn't someone, you know, older than me, let's put it that way. It's quite a much of a younger client. So I wanted them to know it was okay. But yes, it depends on how you know them. It depends on how they're communicating with you as well. When in doubt though, yes, don't use it. If they start using it, then you can make that consideration. Now I find texting is tough. I find my texts, I don't know about you guys, get lost more because I have all my personal ones there. I've got my work ones there. And sometimes people text me and I don't even see who it is because it's not in my contact list. So again, it's hard sometimes to keep on top of it. So when in doubt, I always say email. If the person's not as familiar with you, because I've had people say, yes, I saw that number come through, and then you can introduce yourself. Oh, it's Heather Peters here, because they might not know your number. It may not come up on their phone in your contact list. And right, group tasks, generally no. On group texts, like to try to keep that in terms of personal. Voicemail and phone use. Updating it when you're out of office, absolutely. It's something I've had a few people call it over the years to say, it's still on your out of office. So check it regularly to make sure. Actually, terrible at that. So when I came back from some meetings in Halifax last week, I actually had a little sticky on my phone, take off the message, because it looks unprofessional. Say why you called. This is actually, now tell me if this is appropriate or not. Is this just me? Because this is very much me. I put this one in here. When leaving up, say why you called and be as specific as you can. So I have people call and say, oh, can you call me sometime today? And in a very busy time, you don't have any clue. Is this something that's going to be 2 hours? Is this going to be just have a quick question about this? Can we call back? My policy, I wasn't sure if something was covered. Can you give me a quick call? Absolutely say why you called. I know it drives me crazy, and it puts me off. So again, yes, thanks, Penny, sort of validated that for me, so I appreciate that. So in terms of your phone, we talked about not using it in meetings, and limit your conversation in close quarter, quiet voice, which we talked about, and refrain from using when driving. I'm curious. I find I've had more and more clients send me, I haven't done it on my phone, but say if you text them, it'll come back and say, I'm driving, I'll call you when it's safe to do so, or I'll text you back when it's safe to do so. So is that true? Like, do you find that's being used more? Is that becoming more the standard etiquette, is to not talk to people while you're driving, even though we have cars that actually we can talk to people? Oftentimes, when I'm calling someone, I will say to them, look, I can only call you, I'll be in my car, because it might be less of a conversation, but safety is number one. But I'm just curious if people actually are starting to refrain from that or not. Is it still standard? What are your thoughts from a business perspective? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So using cell phone usage in the car. So is it up to your phone? Like if it's attached to your car, I'm not quite sure how that all works. But anyway, it's something that's shifting. I'm absolutely noticing a shift in that. So which I think is only for the better, because as you know, more than I know, safety in driving is really critical. So lastly, just a few things, and I do want to ask you last question around the holidays as well. When in doubt, watch for cues. Right? Listen, watch for cues. How are people acting, dressing, or communicating? So you go into new work environments. Say, for example, you're going to see a commercial client. If you're in commercial, you're doing the commercial side. Then, yeah, what do you watch? What do you notice? What are they dressed? How are they dressed? If they're not, do you go into a construction site with a suit on? Probably not, right? So in terms of etiquette, you have to see how they are acting. When in doubt, be a little more formal, err on the side of formal. Etiquette breaches when you've created a great relationship. For example, I had a client who was a newer client, but we really started off really well, and we'd had 2 or 3 sessions together. And I was off one day, and he really wanted to meet. And I said, look, happy to, but just want to let you know, you have my jeans on. And he sent back a smiley face and said, okay, I'll wear mine too, right? So little things that you can actually, even if I hadn't said that and I showed up with jeans, I'm sure he would have been okay, because it was my day off, and I have my kids and whatever, and I was doing it as a favor to him, and I was going to be not at home. So again, you have to just figure out what that means to you. When in doubt, ask. So in the holidays, I want to ask your opinion. There's one thing that comes up to me, and is the reason why I put happy holidays. Why do you think I chose the words happy holidays? So if they say Merry Christmas, you got to be careful with who are these people? Where are they from? Are they religious or they're not religious, right? Keeping mind of those words that you use from an etiquette perspective make a difference, right? It includes Christmas and New Year's. It's a holiday. It doesn't mean you're connected to it from a religious perspective. So that's just a little etiquette thing I thought I'd throw in there in our last minute. So thanks so much for putting up with me, my scratchy voice today. So thank you all so much. Happy New Year. It's going to be 2020. It sounds like a sci-fi movie. So enjoy your holidays, and as in your industry, specific, but for all of us, be safe and enjoy yourselves. And hopefully we'll see you in the new year. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.